this is 305 Vox Populi with Mayor Manny Cid. I'm your special guest host today, Micah Clark. They brought me out to the front today, so we're going to have an amazing show. Before I introduce you our special guest, I want to thank our sponsors really quickly. We want to thank our mural sponsor, Grisel Gajano. For those of you who have watched the show before, I'm pretty sure you've seen that wonderful mural that is in the backdrop of our conversations. And she's a local school counselor who donated her time to make sure that our set is looking good. And we're so thankful for that. You can contact her by text at 786-353-8608. Our food today is sponsored by Miami Lakes AutoMall. Thank you so much for that. I got to shout out the homies at Matter Lakes, the film production crew at Matter Lakes Academy Broadcasting. Can you give a quick hand real quick to those awesome people? That's my baby. And our newest sponsor who donated our roadcast, he was a former guest on the show a few weeks ago, and he believed in the vision as much as we did, and he donated a roadcast. We want to thank Enrique Santos so much. And this show couldn't be done without the power and the sponsorship of our guest today, Miami Lakes AutoMall and the legend himself, Fred Senra. How are you, man?
I'm doing great, Micah. It's good to see you.
Good to see you
were on the first podcast, and I was the first guest ever of the podcast, so it's good to see you again.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's been so long.
Good to be here.
Good to be here. Awesome. So like you did mention, you were the first guest. Not only that, but you were the initial investor in this vision. What was your thought process? What did you see in the vision that the mayor presented to you that made you want to initially invest in it?
Well, we at the Miami Lakes AutoMall were always concerned about what we can do for the community all the time, and we sponsor various events, local events. We don't go out of Miami Lakes. We stay within Miami Lakes. So we sponsor a lot of venues in Miami Lakes. So when he brought me this idea, I thought that it was a great opportunity to give back to the community through young students like you guys are, and you were making an effort, and I'm sure that some of you will grow up to be an anchor for one of the major networks someday, or a producer, or a director, or reporter. So I thought that it was a great thing to be part of it since the beginning. So we made the investment not knowing whether it was going to work out or not, but a lot of faith. I have to say Joseph Sosa, the mayor's assistant, was very influential part of this whole equation, and he insisted that we should, and I thought that the opportunity was there, and we took it. So I'm glad we did. I'm glad to see how it's grown and how it's improved, and had so many guests throughout this last 2 years, and hopefully we'll continue with the podcast in the years to come.
Right. And I can say personally, I was for those of you who don't know, I'm one of the founding members of this cohort, and I can say personally that we're really appreciative of the vision and the willingness to help progress this and to get it off the ground. And it means a lot because you are a very busy individual. You're a family man, you're an entrepreneur. Walk us through your just day-to-day of what Fred Senra does on the daily.
Well, I officially retired almost 5 years ago. So I'm no longer the big boss of Miami Lakes AutoMall, but I do continue to have many ties with the organization, and I pretty much direct all the community events, coordinate them all for the AutoMall, and I do have a tremendous customer base. I started in this business back in 1969. We weren't born there yet.
At all.
And I still, believe it or not, I still have customers. Some, of course, have died. Others, they're still alive. Their sons, their daughters, their grandsons and granddaughters continue because they were told by the original that was the person to see. So I meet here with a lot of customers, and not just for sales, but for service, concerns or whatever. And the 3 mornings that I dedicate to the AutoMall. But besides that, I am the elected president of the Miami Lakes Chamber of Commerce, which we have come a long way from last year after the pandemic situation that we all went through. And now it's back rolling, really, really well, and I'm proud of the accomplishments that the chamber has achieved. Besides that, I'm one of the, I believe, 6 members of the Zoning and Planning Board for the town of Miami Lakes. Also, one of the directors of the Town Foundation. I'm the vice commander of the Post 144 because I'm also a veteran.
Thank you
here.
for your service.
Thank you, Miami Lakes. And so my days are very busy and occupied, as you can see, to be able to cover all the areas that, and then besides, of course, the coordination of all the events, that takes a lot of time also as well.
Right. But all of that, I'm sure, it builds to the legacy that you are leaving and the impact that you're making not only in the Miami Lakes community, but in the country at large. As you know, if you ever have skipped a rock across the river, you have that one impact that then just makes ripples that goes out. So that's exactly what you're doing here, and I'm sure that future generations, as you've already mentioned, are still being impacted by the Senra legacy that you're leaving. So if you had to describe your whole life in one word, what word would you choose, and why would you choose it?
Persistence. I'm a very persistent person. You can ask my wife how persistent I could be. I think that life has to be based on that. Of course, other ingredients as well, but you have to have the persistence to achieve the goals that you have set for yourself. If you don't have the that persistence, you kind of just shy away from the way and give up. And I don't believe in giving up. I believe in going right through the end. Sometimes people give up and they don't realize that maybe they could have taken another step and that would have made the difference. So I always like to make that other step, take that other step, just to make sure. Second word for me will be optimist. I'm the biggest optimist in the world. I always look at life as a glass half filled, not half empty. And I think that sometimes people kind of live in a world of doom and gloom. I always see the sun rays come out at some point in time, and even if they're not out, I said they will come out, because I am the eternal optimist as well.
Those are some desirable traits that I think everybody should have. The ability to not only continue to push through, but to push through with a smile on your face. That's a big thing that a lot of people don't have nowadays, especially in this day and age after COVID. A lot of people just have a depressed spirit.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to push through and to persevere in spite of, and still do it with a great attitude, and to treat everybody right, and to still have that level of optimism, that's admirable, for sure. So speaking on that, and you did touch a bit on your wife and your family, but typically if Manny was here, he would ask, "What's your why?" I want to change it and say, "What's your who?" or "Who's your who?" rather. Who's that person that pushes you and inspires you every day to get out and to be persistent, to be optimistic, besides yourself?
I think the being married for 55 years,
Congratulations.
and I think that my wife has been. Sometimes I could even say that she's hold me back, because she's a lot wiser than I am. That's one thing that I lack, the wisdom. Many times I go out and and sometimes I could hit my face in the on the pavement because I don't think it's gonna hurt me.
Right.
But she's different. So I would say that that she's been a great influencer in my daily life. Whether sometimes is to approve what I do or disapprove, but she definitely has been the most influential. Also, my dad. My dad was a very wise man, um, and lived his life with a lot of street savvy. He grew up too fast, probably. Back in his days. So I always wanted to emulate, some of his better gifts, and especially his drive. He had a tremendous drive. He was like some people could call a workaholic, but I can remember that when I was a kid, he used to have three businesses, not one but three. So he was busy from morning till night, 6, 7 days a week, many times. So he was a driver. He was a driver. So I consider him another influential person in my life.
For sure, and I'm glad you brought up your father because that's actually where I wanted to shift gears a bit. Um, you come from a musical legacy, not just in America but in Cuba as well. I believe we were having a conversation before we started, and you were saying that he was declared the youngest radio announcer in Cuba at the time. And so the impact that he left on the country, even before the revolution, was monumental. Would you like to expound on his legacy and how that's impacted you?
Yeah, yes, I'll be glad to. He he started very young, and as I said, he was always always had that entrepreneurial mind, and at a very young age, 13 years old. Uh, he and another gentleman by the name of Francisco Huerta, who was a piano player, started a company. And this was a traveling kids with they had some talent. They could sing. They could do different things, and they used to travel throughout the whole island and make presentations in different theaters throughout the country, and from there came out a lot of young singers and actors, and you name it. And my dad was the owner of the company when he was 13 years old, along with Francisco. They used to, his name, they used to call him Paquito. And From there, he started in radio, and a very young age. Also, 14, he started in radio, and he was very popular. He had, as a matter of fact, my mother went to see him in one of his radio shows, one of his radio broadcasts.
Really?
Because her sister had told her, says, "Why don't you go, and that way you can see Fernandito, as he used to be known, and that's how she met him.
Wow.
And there were live audience, in the studios, and so my dad was, a great MC, and he was not an actor. He would present the different, people that were performing, whether it was on the radio show or whether it was on the traveling show, and. At one point in time, when he was 14, I think it was in 1941, he had a problem with the National College of Broadcasting in Cuba. They wanted to kick him out because he was underage. And apparently, he had a name. He had made a name for himself back then. And some of his colleagues, some liked it and some didn't. So I guess somebody complained, to the National Broadcasting College, and they wanted to get him out of the air. So my dad, being as a driving force as he always was, and also very astute, he asked to have an audience with the then president of the country, Mr. Batista, Fulgencio Batista.
So he just called up the president.
He
and
called,
said, hey,
not the president, but he called the palace and then talked to whoever assistant, but he apparently they knew his name
at 14 years of
at
age.
14 years old, because it was it was kind of famous back then, and people knew, and there was no TV back then. It was radio, so people used to listen to the radio a lot. So he had made a name for himself. So anyway, he was granted an audience with the president, and the president himself, spoke to him in his office and asked him what was the problem. He said, "Well, Mr. President, the problem is that they want me out of the radio." And the president was kind of surprised. He said, "What do you mean they want you? Who wants you out of the radio?" He said, "Well, the College of Broadcasting." He says, "No, that's not going to happen." So he made a presidential decree naming my dad the youngest radio announcer in Cuba. So that made it official.
Right.
After that decree, nobody could touch him,
Right.
really. And he stayed in radio, for many more years after that. While he was in the radio business, he started a record company, recording company called Discos Meca, which later he had to change because Decca Records from the United States kind of sue him for name similarity. So that's when he came up with the name Meca Suaritos, which was his partner in the business. And so he started recording the different artists in Cuba. I remember one of the first recording artists that he had was a quartet called the Yopis Quartets. The Yopis Quartet got to be extremely famous, not just in Cuba, but all over Latin America, to the point that my dad was invited in 1960, which was after the revolution, to Mexico City. There was the biggest theater in Mexico City that they wanted. The performers were the Quarteto, the Yopis Quartet, and Bill Haley and his Comets from the United States. So you can imagine at that time, rock and roll was,
Big
was
thing.
it. It was a big
Right.
thing. Bill Haley was considered to be the same as Elvis Presley, pretty much, and all over the world. So there they were the quartet, the Yopis Quartet, and Bill Haley and his Comets, performing for I don't know how many thousands of people. I don't know, 10,000 people or whatever in that theater, maybe a little less. I'm not sure, but it was quite a few thousands. So that was one of the first artists that he had. I remember seeing one of the numbers, which was a bolero by the name of No pidas más perdón, don't ask for any forgiveness, any more forgiveness. That song got to be the number one hit, and it stayed on the hit list there at the radio station, the Radio Progreso, which was the radio station that my dad worked at. For I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months, it was the number one. The people used to request it all the time and that type of thing. So he continued on, and and was very successful with all the other artists that he was acquiring along the way, and the recordings, and so he had the record company since that time in Cuba. It was early 50s. When we came to this country in 1961, he, some of his friends, peers from the record business that were already settled here, helped him out and getting started again. And he started releasing, a lot of the recordings that he had made in Cuba, and then started making some recordings here in the early '60s as well, with different singers and orchestras and combos and what have you. And I was a kid, and once in a while I used to play it in the recording studios, with the orchestra or whatever, because I love music. So I used to get in and said, "You let me play?" He said, "Yeah, go ahead, play." So they allowed me to play with them. And then in some other, I played, percussion, and a few of the recordings that he made here in Miami. So anyway, years went by, and he got sick, and he did sell, some of the recordings, but many of the recordings he kept. Some that he had released prior, and some that he never released. So I remember he used to always tell me, it says, Fernandito, that's how he used to call me, don't throw that away. There are thousands of dollars invested in those recordings, and they're all sitting there on those file cabinets. So whenever you have time, go through them and then do something with it. So my dad died, and after his death, and when we, started doing the normal thing that you start cleaning up the thing,
Right.
The closets and whatever, I picked up all those reel-to-reel tapes with the recordings. They were all in individual boxes. And what I did was put them in a storage with air conditioning, because I didn't have the time at that moment to to do anything with it. So about 3 years went by, and I decided to get them out of the warehouse, bring them home, and then start working on it. It took about 8 months to put the whole thing together. So I was able to, with the help of a local studio here, to convert those reel-to-reel tapes into digital. And then after they were converted to digital, gave me the opportunity to listen to what those recordings were and how they sound and what have you. So
Right, and just to expound on that, for those of you who don't know what reel to reels are, back in the 40s and 50s and even before then, the way music was recorded was through analog gear. So what they'll do is they take these about half-inch discs or so, and all of the artists would record onto that, and engineers would record the music onto that. So in today's standard, that is kind of pretty ancient. So the work to try to get that from the analog reel to reel to something that you'll hear on YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music, it can be a bit of a challenge, no?
yes, it was a challenge, even for me, because I was out of the business. I had been in the business when I was younger, and but I was not aware of all the changes and everything that there were in the current moment.
Right.
So anyway, they were converted to digital, and it gave me the opportunity to start listening to all the recordings. After I listened to all of them, then I made the decision that to release them, they had to be released by genre, because all of them, I think, maybe with the exception of one, were artists that had died, years prior. So went ahead and made the selection, and came out with a total of 15 albums. Uh, and like I said, most of them were recorded in Cuba. Some were recorded here in Miami, and I know of one that was recorded in Panama. And made the selection, and went ahead and reproduced all the songs one by one. because being old, they had some faults,
Right.
and I had to, really listen to them, and then make the corrections, which in this day and age you can do. It's kind of easy. So if you listen to any of these recordings now, they don't sound like they were recorded back in the 50s or in the early 60s. They sound pretty much like were recorded yesterday. They were given the fidelity that the recording allowed. The faults were taken away by real nice editing that we did in the studio. So the final product came out, and we called it, gave it a title of Cuba and Its Music. Like I said, 2 volumes of music to dance with, bailables, 9 volumes of boleros, which is the romantic, soft, ballads type of songs. 1 of guarachas and guajiras. Guajiras is country music, the Cuban country music. The country people in Cuba usually call guajiros, or they are called guajiros. Then 1 of tangos, which is an Argentinian genre, and waltzes from Peru, Peruvian waltzes, which are very, very beautiful. 1 recorded by the original author, played by him on piano, danzones, Cuban danzones, which is a very old, at the beginning of music in Cuba, that were actually composed by him, El Maestro Antonio Maria Romeos. That is his family is, continues the legacy. They're all actors, they're all singers. They have something to do with the music world. So that's one of them. Another one that calls to mind is Rene Cabell. Rene Cabell was considered the tenor of the Antilles, of the Antille Islands, all the Cuba, Dominican Republic. He used to sing. I remember seeing him sing it in shows or whatever with the other tenor from Mexico, Rene Cabell, another very famous tenor in Latin America. So that's one of the singers that is in this recordings. There is another volume called La Trova. La Trova is a guitarist, is a troubadour. This gentleman, his name was Berto Gonzalez. Berto Gonzalez was one of the most famous troubadours in Cuba. He used to play in the place called, which is one of the most famous spots in Havana, called La Bodeguita del Medio. It's a kind of a bar type, food place. Still exists. And Berto was one of the troubadours that used to play on a regular basis in that. Another singer that also a part of the collection is Elizabeth del Rio. Elizabeth del Rio was a modern, at that time, songstress, very, very sweet, very soft type of singer, and we also used her in this Cuba and Its Music collection. So anyway, we put together a total of 15 albums, which they have been for the last 3 years. They have been on, I think, 51 platforms all over the world. And to name a few: Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, and some of the others, I guess, that I don't recall the names. But it is amazing to see when the royalties come in from the company that I signed with to upload all those albums. That sometimes you get you read the where they were streamed at,
Right.
where they were downloaded.
It's all over.
Israel, Germany. You say, how in the world that people want to listen to Cuban music? In Israel,
Right.
all over the place. That there, music is music, and these are quality music. But besides everything that was done, all the efforts that were put forth, I did this because of my dad. I wanted to honor him, and he was such a well-known individual, but kind of forgotten by history. He was never, a loudmouth, trying to be the first all the time. He was just performing and uh, uh, performing the talents that he had, but it was kind of forgotten through the years. And I wanted to kind of bring him back because he deserves that. He deserves to be remembered, not just by me, which I always do, but by the world as a very talented individual. So had so many different facets in his life. MC, radio announcer, record producer. So it's something to be honored by. And so, regardless, needless to say that the investment that I made in converting everything and releasing everything, I still haven't made it back, and I don't expect to make it back because I didn't do it for that. I didn't do it to make money. I did it just to honor him. So it's a great opportunity to maintain the Cuban culture, which is slowly being lost. With the new generations, they don't. A lot of the Cuban or Hispanics or whatever, they don't listen to that kind of music anymore. But maybe their parents or their grandparents. But it's good to have some, to be current in that sense. So that's the reason why I did it, and I invested the time and efforts, to do that.
Awesome. When a lot of people see you, they just see you as, oh, Fred Senra, the car guy. But when you really get down and talk about the family history and the music legacy that you come from, it's really an interesting conversation. And it's a conversation that I encourage all people of all ages to have with our seasoned individuals, those who have been here for a while. They have a lot of history, a lot of knowledge, to help keep the culture going. And I find it very, very interesting. I'd like to give anyone in the audience an opportunity if they have any questions. If not, something that we like to do in the show is we like to turn the situation around per se, and we'll let the guest ask. Typically would be Manny, but since I'm here, if you have any questions for me before we wrap it up.
No, the only thing I can say is that I feel it's a great feeling to see young people like all of you that I see here in this room and in my office, producing and directing and then being the guest, the interviewer, presenter. As part of this, it makes me proud to see this and realize that we do have a future in this country, in our country. That it's not all doom and gloom. It's not all bad. I know that you guys are going to make it great someday, and I just hope to be alive by then so that I can say, I knew that guy, I knew that kid, I knew that girl, that she was there in my office one day. So we'll see, but it makes me proud.
Awesome. Well, guys, there you have it. Another edition of 305 Vox Populi with Manny Cid. I'm your special host today, Michael Clark.